Hello! Today I want to go over spectral noises. Now, that word has a lot of definitions to a lot of people. I'm talking about the term commonly used in the electronic scene I'm part of. Super soft sounds that seem to center around the sine wave. They're very, very smooth, very rounded noises that don't typically have much as far as transients or any harshities whatsoever. The easiest way to go about making these kinds of noises is denoising. Now you may ask yourself, what the heck is a denoising? For the longest time ever, sound engineers all over the planet have been trying to figure out a way to get rid of random background noise that you don't want in your audio. The best way that people have come up with so far, windscreens, to get rid of the background noise and directional miking and stuff. But for those of us who don't have millions and millions of dollars to spend on audio equipment, we have the second best thing, which is post-processing to the best of our abilities. And out of the long time journey for trying to find the best way to remove background noise, we came up with this thing called a denoiser, which is a plugin that takes and looks at the entire spectrum and finds the lowest points and cuts audio around. So that way, if it's not the loudest part of the mix, it's not going to come through. There's been a lot of different algorithms invented for how to do this, but the super simple ones are how we get these spectral noises that we find really commonly in the future-y subgenres of electronic music. My favorite plugins for doing these things are Z-Noise by Waves and MSpectralDynamics by Melda. Both of these plugins are quite expensive. I don't have very many good free alternatives for this. Unfortunately, these denoising plugins don't really make the waves as like the DAW creators as something that they should create a native plugin for it. I don't think there's like a Fruity denoise or an Ableton denoise. As I went over in the last video though, there are probably some Max for Live devices out there that can do a very similar thing. There might be a free one. So let me go over Z-Noise and let me go over MSpectralDynamics and what they do, because they do a little bit of different things. So first, let's get into Z-Noise by Waves. Let's get a sample out. And this sample is pretty overall kind of noisy. There's a lot of things going on in the high end to keep it very full sounding through the noise. But with the more common future-y sounds that you might find across the electronic space now, you want it to be a lot less noisy. Let's load up Z-Noise on this. You'll see here it looks like an EQ. There's a threshold for when or won't it let the sample as is bypass through the denoising algorithm. The reduction is the amount it's going to reduce the noise in the mix. And then you have it to attack release like it's a compressor, a transients to attempt to preserve transients, and a knee, which is going to be very similar to how a knee in a compressor would work. There's a couple different algorithms down here. You have a punch algorithm, a normal algorithm, and a smooth algorithm. And then you have a couple AI-driven noise learning profiles that I don't typically find so much. From here on out, it's literally just taking a peek and moving it around like an EQ. So let's see here. If we make our threshold as low as possible and our reduction as high as possible, with default settings on the rest of it, it'll sound a little bit like this. Because the threshold is so low, it's letting everything over a negative 60 decibel point go through. Now, if we make this too high, it's not going to let anything go through, because it's going to see everything as noise. So what we want to try to find is a good middle point for our threshold here. And then we can change the algorithm based on what we think it might sound best as. Seems to me like each algorithm kind of sounds like the name entails. The smooth is going to have a lot longer of a release just built into it. The punch is going to have a little bit shorter release built into it, as well as letting more transients come through. It's just like different compressor modes, essentially. The green is where your input is, and the red is going to be where the output is. And you can see you can kind of EQ it around because the sub is so much louder, and we still want the threshold line here to be like denoising around it. We can do that. So you'll see it's being counted as part of the noise a little bit more if we push the threshold line up on the bass area here. And with Z-Noise, it allows a little bit of the surrounding frequencies to get through. As you can see, it seems like it has a pretty wide like Q factor almost. A lot of these surrounding frequencies, whether or not they should be considered noise, get through anyway because it's mostly getting the valleys as opposed to the peaks. It's letting the peaks go through and the valleys get reduced more. Whereas a lot of other denoising algorithms get very specific with which frequencies can make it through and which ones don't. And that's what brings us to MSpectralDynamics. If you use an algorithm with MSpectralDynamics, it's a lot more particular about which frequencies do and don't make it through the denoising algorithm. You'll see MSpectralDynamics has a lot of presets built into it because the way that this plugin works has a lot of room for different functions. It can do things such as just straight up flattening your spectrum, and it could do other more specific things such as de-essing and denoising. A lot of the parameter changes that aren't detailed to these specific presets almost are behind this edit button. This is what it's actually doing if you're not using the preset that is pre-designed to do a specific function. The denoising function looks a little bit like this. It has a very similar thing where the threshold is here and how harshly it reduces it is determined by the ratio, as well as things like smoothness and slope where it catches the surrounding frequencies. If I reduce the ratio down to infinity and this threshold a little bit further up, it's a lot more picky about what it does and doesn't let through. And that's what I think I like about MSpectralDynamics. It also has an attack and release similar to the Z-Noise. You have a couple of different functions, but it doesn't have different modes like punch or smooth. Z-Noise, I think, is also a little bit more simple. I also think Z-Noise has a little bit more built-in latency, whereas this one doesn't have as much. Z-Noise has its own unique sound. MSpectralDynamics will have its own unique sound. Mess around with these two and figure out which one you think would suit your sound more, what you're trying to get. But I think that they both work super well for making those spectral sounds. There's other denoising softwares out there, such as Isotope's RX8 denoising, and there are other denoising algorithms that are built into other plugins, such as DTBLKFXS. It's all down to which kind of denoising software you think will make the spectral effects you're trying to make best. I hope I encapsulated the general idea. Spectral noise is made from denoising. Super sick. Very fun. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. If you have any money, let me have it at Patreon. If you have some cool time to hang out with me, we can do that on Discord. I think that's all I have for you guys. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make something cool out of this, or perish.